PAN is honored that former council member Hillary Freeman has agreed to be the forum moderator. She will explain this evening's format. Hillary?
Thank you, Mark. So why don't we start out with the 1-minute opening statements, and we'll do this in alphabetical order. So Mr. Dan Dykewell.
There you go. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I am Dan Dykewell, running for City Council. I've lived in Palo Alto 18 years. I have a strong history in the public and private sector, and I'm well prepared to serve on the council. I've spent 20 years in management in Silicon Valley. I'm also a realtor. I've spent many years in the schools, particularly in the PTAs, the last 2 serving as president of the district-wide council of PTAs. I served on the district's 20-year facilities master plan and also worked on many of the bond measures and parcel taxes. My volunteer work includes serving as a board member of the Chamber of Commerce, Palo Alto Recreation Foundation. I served on the Blue Ribbon Task Force. And I can go on, but I'm running out of time. As I walk around and talk to people, one of the main concerns I hear is they're just really concerned about the budget, and in particular, the structural problem we have with costly health and retirement benefits. So I'm definitely going to work on that in particular. Focus on the economic health of the community with our retail establishments.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, next we have Chris Gaither.
So I assume we talk like this, okay? No. I talk into this, okay. I'm Chris Gaither. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to this forum. We're happy to see you here. It's too loud for someone. I'm Chris Gaither, and basically I won't talk about issues right now. I'll let you address those in the questions. I'm a 25-year resident of Palo Alto. I have a 30-year work experience, including work in the private sector for companies like American Express, Xerox, Industrial Indemnity. I also have work in the nonprofit sector, in affordable housing, and I have been on nonprofit boards locally here, namely La Comida. I've been on La Comida board for 10 years and currently serve as a secretary. And on that board, I do a lot of different activities involved in the committees, outreach, publicizing, transportation, working on personnel issues. I know how to hire and manage staff, and I know how to work in communities. My experience in managing affordable housing has taught me how to deal with communities and relations and residents, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right, our next candidate is Mr. Tim Gray.
Hi, I'm Tim Gray, and I was captured by the vision of Lucille Packard some years back, and I came to Palo Alto and helped build the Packard Children's Hospital finance team, and met my wife during that time and have enjoyed a real great commitment to the service and tradition of this town. My wife and I met while working at Packard Children's Hospital. We then decided to have a more personal commitment with 3 adopted children. Michael and Julia are 7, and Catherine is 10, and our dog Mana is 4 months old. My wife Susan works at the Packard Children's Hospital. She's the PTA president at Wanabriones Elementary School, where our children are receiving the gift of one of the best educations in the world. We love this place and are inspired to preserve the qualities that have kept us here for the past 20 years.
Thank you. And next, Mr. John Hackman.
Again, I'm John Hackman. Control spending. Control spending. Not through our own fault. Our city is in a financial crisis. Some cities are even giving up their unitary police department now. Many cities are laying off. We're preparing wisely and well, I think, but it must be our focus. As your city council person, I think you want someone with experience, judgment, and who's right and will focus on all the issues, but mainly the main issue to control spending. Pensions cannot be $2 to $6 million in lifetime payout for one senior person. We can't afford it. For experience, I was a teacher at Stanford Environmental Policy. I've been a general practice attorney solving people's problems for 30 years, and I've been on the boards of the League of Women Voters, the Consumer Co-op Retail Grocery Store, and Healthcare for the Poor at Mayview Community Clinic. I think I have the experience and the judgment and focusing on the main issue for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Karen Holman.
Thank you to Pan, and thank you all for coming. Palo Alto faces many challenging issues, whether it's high-speed rail or the hospital expansion or housing that threatens our classroom size. My 8 years' experience on the Planning and Transportation Commission and earlier involvement in the community have well prepared me to address and evaluate those projects. Palo Alto, like most cities these days, is facing some serious economic concerns and considerations, and I have some very specific ways that I would like to see those addressed, and I hope we get to talk about those later. And perhaps most importantly, I've chosen to focus on the public trust and honoring the public trust. The city has some wonderful staff and some excellent council members, but we do need to refocus our attention on serving the public. That is the primary responsibility of government. We need to have a leveled playing field and adequate access to information. And through that, I think we can build stronger community, come to conclusion more quickly, and while we won't always agree, our differences need not divide us, but we need to build community for that to happen.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Larry Klein.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you to Pan for sponsoring this event. The three watchwords of my campaign are experience, leadership, results. Let me talk about the first two in my 60 seconds here. I was one of the 9 co-founders of the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District back in 1972, and I'm proud that we have now acquired, through the district, 60,000 acres of open space land. I was elected to the Palo Alto City Council in 1981 and served until 1989, when I voluntarily stepped down and chose not to seek re-election. I got recycled, if you will, and was elected to the council again in 2005, and presently completing my last year of that 4-year term. My colleagues chose me 3 times to be mayor of Palo Alto, in 1984, 1989, and last year in 2008. The issues that I'm going to be talking about tonight certainly start with the budget and our negotiations with the SEIU. I also want to talk about quality of life issues such as high-speed rail and how an elevated high-speed rail would just be a disaster for Palo Alto, and also be talking about what more we can do on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we have Leon Leong.
Thank you for coming and listening. My name's Leon Leong. I'm running for City Council because I'd like to see the council focus on issues that are very basic to Palo Alto. The specific issues I'd like to see the council address is one is housing density. I'm opposed to increasing housing density unless unless traffic and school overcrowding are significantly mitigated. The second issue I'd like to see the council address is the economic health of the city. We need to broaden our tax base, and consequently, I'm opposed to the business license tax because I think it'll make it harder to bring more community-serving businesses to our town. The third issue I'd like to see the city address is the structural deficits in the city budget. Our city budget has grown over 40% in the last 5 years. We need a budget that's more transparent. We need to look for efficiencies and in the government, and we need to look at how we can restructure the government.
Thank you, Mr. Leong. Mr. Corey Levins.
Thank you. I'm running because Palo Alto is confronting several critical issues in the next term of the City Council. For me, the most critical is the budget deficit and the city's finances, and what that entails is increasing our revenues and controlling our expenses. But I recognize that there are other issues that are near and dear to everybody else, whether it's a high-speed rail, development, or whatever. There are other critical issues. However, it's not going to be sufficient in this next term for a single issue candidates. We're going to need candidates that can address all the issues, synthesize all the facts and all the details. My background, I think, makes me uniquely qualified to do that. I'm a corporate attorney. I used to own a retail business. I've been involved in neighborhood associations and in the school site councils. I think the council needs new voices and new perspectives to address these issues. I am a new voice. I will bring a new perspective to the city council. I hope you'll support me on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gail Price.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Gail Price. I'm running for City Council. I'm running for a variety of reasons, but let me just quickly outline my background. I have over 22 years of experience as a transportation and city planner, both of which I think would be very valuable here in Palo Alto at this time. We're facing many serious issues. Additionally, I have about 30 years of experience as a community activist, working on a variety of programs, child care advocacy, education, and arts and programs to serve the youth. I feel that there are several important issues today that we need to address: revised and revitalized economic development strategies, responsible land use, transportation, and housing decisions, and we also need to address the issues related to a caring community. We need to look at some of the mental health issues our children are facing. A caring community is a civilized and respectful community, and a caring community honors work and honors creativity and imagination. Vote for Gail Price for City Council.
Thank you. And next we have Greg Scharf.
Thank you for coming, and thanks to Pan for hosting this event. I've been a 20-year plus Palo Alto resident. My law practice is just off California Avenue. It's been here for 10 years. And there are several critical issues that are facing Palo Alto right now, which I want to address. The first is ABAG's imposition of 2,700 housing units on Palo Alto. I think we need to vigorously resist that. We need to vigorously resist creeping urbanism. Palo Alto is a wonderful place with great parks, schools, services, and we need to keep it that way. I want to be a strong voice for our neighborhoods, and I promise I'll always listen to all of you. Also, we have to vigorously oppose the high-speed rail in terms of having an above-ground wall built through our neighborhoods. I think that's a serious issue, and we have to deal with it with everything we have to make sure that we don't divide our neighborhoods. Also, there's the budget issues. We have long-term pension and health care issues. We have tough union negotiations. We need to stand firm. And feel free to go to my website, electgregscharf.com, for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Ms. Nancy Shepard.
Thank you, Hillary. Oh, it is on, I'm sorry. I've been a professional managerial accountant for 30 years here. I've moved here 20 years ago with my family to raise our 4 kids. It was when I was in the schools that I received, volunteering in the schools, when I received the Sally Siegel Award for the work that I did to spearhead district-wide fundraising throughout the school system. We now have an educational foundation that raises funds for all of the kids equally throughout the school district. I am here to run for City Council because I think Palo Alto needs defending. We have to stretch our tax dollars to take care of our valued city services. We need to have timely information about the big issues that are coming into play in Palo Alto, like high-speed rail and the housing that Greg just talked about. Because the decisions that we make today are going to determine the quality of our future. So if you haven't received one of the flyers, please raise your hand. My manager will bring one to you. And vote for me on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Brian Steen.
Thanks, Hillary. My name is Brian Steen. I'm pleased to see so many familiar faces in the crowd here tonight. I've lived in Palo Alto for 10 years, and it's been my pleasure to live here, gain great experience, and I feel it's my time now to return some of the experience that I've learned in the 10 years that I've been here. prior to my time in Palo Alto, I used to work with the U.S. Forest Service as a ranger. I was the executive director of the Big Sur Land Trust, and then when I came here, I became the executive director of the Sempervirens Fund, where collectively, with those two organizations, we preserved over 18,000 acres of California landscape, and in the process raised $50 million to do so. So I've had a lot of experience in negotiations, fundraising, dealing with hard problems on a public service basis. My whole career has been dedicated to public service. I'm currently on the board of the Palo Alto Rotary. I'm a former school board member with the Pacific Grove School District. I have a special interest in high-speed rail. In terms of minimizing the impacts of high-speed rail, I simply want to see it go underground. It's very simple from my perspective, but it's a very hard job in terms of actually performing that. This past weekend, I led a workshop, some of you may have seen it, at the Sheraton, where we had over 100 people for 2 different days analyzing the different ways that high-speed rail might be brought to Palo Alto on a safe and feasible basis. So those are some of my issues. I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Mark Weiss.
Welcome, thanks for coming out. My name is Mark Weiss, and I'm running for City Council, and I moved here in 1974. I'm a graduate of Gunn High School and Terman Middle School. I was student body president at Terman, and I'm trying to follow the great tradition of Palo Alto statesmen like Joe Simidian and Gary Fazzino. I went from student government to general government. I moved back here about 15 years ago, started an arts business, a concert promotion business, and an artist management business. I'm very interested in the role of the arts in democracy and here in our community, and I feel that running for City Council is a natural extension of the arts advocacy I've been doing in recent years. So I hope you'll consider me for one of your 5 choices on November 3rd.
Thank you so much, and thank you, candidates, for your opening remarks. So now that everybody's warmed up, the audience is warmed up and ready, the candidates have their throats ready to go, we will start with the barrage of questions. You ready? All right, we'll go. Regarding the city budget, how can Palo Alto spend its money more efficiently? What would you encourage the city to do to increase the revenues? Okay, everybody got that? Okay, we'll start with Mr. Dykewell. So spend more efficiently.
Okay. Well, as the current, or as the recent audit showed with the telephone system contracts, that there's a potential $250,000 savings. There are still areas in the budget that need to be ferreted out in terms of efficiencies. We might be able to take advantage of some automation efficiencies, especially if there are federal stimulus dollars available. But part of it also is just making sure everyone is, that we foster or cultivate a culture of people really looking for efficiencies in their day-to-day work. In terms of revenues, we have the opportunity with the business license tax to get approximately $3 million. I do support that. I think it's not onerous on businesses. I myself would pay it as an independent businessman, and I think it's a valid tax. Additional revenues could be, let's see, I'm losing this one. I'm sorry. Short answers are tough.
Thank you. Okay, again, how can Palo Alto spend its money more efficiently, and what would you encourage the city to do to increase its revenues? Mr. Gaither.
Yes, thank you. Do you mind if I sit? I feel more comfortable sitting. Okay, to answer the second part first, I feel that we need to bring more businesses into Palo Alto. We need to make it attractive for businesses to be here. As you can see in our downtown, we have high vacancy rates, and as you go across town, we have high vacancy rates. So there's something that we're doing that is driving businesses away, and we need to look at neighboring cities to see what they're doing, like Mountain View. People seem to be very happy there to do business. Second of all, I would revamp what we do on our streets in terms of parking. Why not have parking meters and do the double whammy and get more money that way through the meters, as well as when people overextend their stay, you get the tickets. In terms of reducing expenses, what the city is trying to do with salary and benefits right now is what we want to stay on target to do, renegotiate all 3 labor union contracts and get down the medical and pension. And then secondly, what we need to do is to manage our different accounts differently so that we are spending less. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Hackman.
Again, John Hackman. To control spending and spend more efficiently, work with the union and management, negotiate a benefits package we can afford. At the end of each year, 2009, when every wage dollar is paid an employee for their hard work, every pension dollar that we contribute to that person's pension for that year should be in the can, close the books, in the bank. Any other system would be less than optimum and not good for Palo Alto. To increase revenues, I was invited to go to the Chamber of Commerce Executive Committee tomorrow morning, which I'm going to. I'm proposing that Commerce create a free membership category for all the 7,000 to 9,000 businesses in Palo Alto on the Hotmail Yahoo model. We have one level of free membership and then the traditional paid membership that many of us here join to support the Chamber. This will enhance revenue. And no on A will also enhance revenue. We don't know how much we're driving business away. We've gotten long 30 years without it. Don't drive business away now.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Klein.
Thank you. On the expense side, 2/3 of our expenditures are for personnel. This is true for almost all local governments. That's the area we need to focus on the most. We are in serious negotiations with our union, the largest union, SEIU, and I think that that's very clear that we need to reduce the amount that we spend for pensions and for health care and ask the union membership to step up and absorb a portion of those expenditures to bring them more into line where the market is. That would be a significant reduction in our expenses. Approximately $3 to $4 million a year is what we're asking for the unions from that. Another area where I think we can be more efficient is the use of technology. That's one of the reasons we hired a very tech-savvy new city manager, and I'm hopeful that down the line we can produce more savings through the use of technology. Revenue, I'm for Measure A. I think that will produce about $3 million a year. It's a modest tax. It's lower. Our rate is lower than at some of our surrounding communities and far lower than San Francisco's. Lastly, we need to be more entrepreneurial. We have some land at the Animal Services Center that we can rent to a Honda automobile agency, and I think that's a potential for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss.
With your permission, I'm going to answer this more obliquely.
Excuse me for 1 second. I'm sorry. I know you probably don't want to use the microphone, but it's...
I'd rather talk to these people directly.
It's being broadcast.
I'm sorry.
It's being taped. But if you prefer...
I apologize to the viewers in TV land, but this is Palo Alto. We can't hear you. Okay, I will speak very loud. Try it one more time. And use the mic.
Okay, excuse me. Hold on 1 minute, folks. Shh. Wait, guys, remember, we're going to be polite. If Mr. Weiss does not choose to use the mic, the downside is that his voice may not be broadcast to the millions, hundreds of thousands, whatever, of people who are going to be watching it, and he knows that is the circumstance, and it is his decision not to speak on a mic. So, for the people that are here, please just listen to him, and we'll go forward from there. Thank you.
You know, I want to give a shout out to Dorothy Bradshaw, who was my drama teacher at Terman back in the day. Mr. Shelby does a great job at Gunn High School. I will project my voice and raise your hand if you cannot hear me, in which case I will follow your feedback. I actually think this idea of government as a business is a misconception. Government is a social service. Government is you, me, working together. It's we the people. I don't like the idea of government being described as a business. The panels we've had previously were all business questions, no social questions. I agree with Gail. Gail hinted that we should have some social questions on the agenda. In terms of, I think Palo Altans demand a lot from our civil servants, and we're willing to pay for it. I feel in a general sense, for example, maybe we could work on a statewide level and repeal Prop 13. I think that would solve a lot of our problems.
Thank you. Okay. All right, and Ms. Holman would like to also answer that question.
This is dangerous because you don't know what's coming up later. As far as, sorry, things are falling apart up here. As far as watching the money that we spend, I think that one of the things we need to do definitely is address the compensation package of the employees union, and that has been addressed. And I think a respectful negotiation. The city has to thrive for the unions to survive, and that's a simple matter of fact. As far as other approaches, I think we need to look at specific and targeted audits, especially the Public Works Department being the largest department with the largest single budget. The California Avenue incident is not only emotionally but also financially expensive. And I think we need to look at how that happened very clearly and correct that action. As far as bringing more money to Palo Alto, we need to be much more aggressive and creative in attracting more retail to the community. And thank you. And I lost my train of thought there, though. We need to not make decisions like we did with Alma Plaza, where we're actually reducing and losing retail square footage, as we did there. We need much more retail, especially the local independent businesses, which complement our community and make it stand out from other communities and keep our shopping dollars here.
Two more people that are interested in answering this question. So, Ms. Gail Price.
Thank you. In terms of efficiencies, it's my strong belief that the employees closest to the work have very creative ideas about how that could be done. And I know that we need to work harder in that area in working with them. We need to use the audit that has already taken place and to prioritize the fiscal benefits and opportunities there. And we should create a joint benefits committee which is composed of management and labor unions, much like they do in the school district, which develops a long-term relationship and problem solving. In terms of revenue, we need more aggressive economic development strategies. We need to look at best practices from communities like Berkeley and Sunnyvale. I've looked at both of those. We need more hotels in Palo Alto, and we need to be more friendly to a variety of retail and business services so they can get through the process. We need to contract in services, such as the fire department does, providing services to Stanford and the county, and that's a way to get additional revenue, and employees have ideas about how that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Levins.
Well, as I said in my opening statement, this is the most important issue I think that Palo Alto faces. If we're going to cut or spend more efficiently, what we need, that means that we have to speak with our employees, as they comprise 2/3 of the budget. The employees are eager to work with us, and we need to have a good dialogue with them, a good working relationship with them, and I'm concerned that the current negotiations are doing anything but getting the most that we're going to get out of our employees. As far as enhancing revenues, Palo Alto has to change the culture of almost being blasé or anti-business. We need to recognize that we have to attract businesses. We have to stem the tide of businesses leaving Palo Alto. We do this by not passing unrealistic or anti-competitive business taxes, making it more expensive to do business in Palo Alto. We do it by making Palo Alto attractive to businesses and showing them that we're willing to work with them and create new ideas for businesses to come.
Thank you. All right, we have more. Okay. All right, Ms. Shepard.
Hi, I just want to say that I'm really actually very supportive of the way the current City Council has handled the $10 million budget deficit by shouldering three different parts of our community. One, bringing efficiencies into our government, our current City Hall. Two, restructuring the union contract so that we can sustain their jobs and their benefits into the future so that they can retire. And then also the business licensing tax. This is a tax that will really just charge people an annual fee because it's per employee on the businesses of either $34 if you're in manufacturing each year or $95 if you're a professional like my husband is. This is, and I don't think it will detract from business in Palo Alto because they will be moving or relocating right into another community with a business tax. So, but to bring in more business, look at Town and Country Shopping Center. Look at how that tired shopping center amplified itself into a vital retail center well, not overnight, but without taking any extra limits on square footage, and I think that needs to be amplified throughout the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And okay, and finally, Mr. Steen.
Yes, thank you, Hillary. Just two comments. I agree with all the other candidates who are saying that we need to have a more friendly atmosphere for businesses. If I were on the city council, though, I would most certainly oppose establishing a new system of parking meters and fines to go along with that. I think that's very much of an anti-business proposition. As a resident, I feel that when I pull into a free 2-hour slot here in Palo Alto, that somebody is saying, welcome to Palo Alto. We're glad that you're here. We're glad to provide you a couple hours to do your business. So I think that should be maintained. On a larger scale, I've been very critical in terms of the city developing properties or approving the development of properties where they are being converted from commercial zoning to residential zoning. The former Hyatt Ricky's property is the big example of that, where we lost $1.35 million per year in revenue from the former hotel. Now we have $130,000 in revenue from that site. That's a tenfold drop, and that's one reason why we have a deficit. So I certainly would oppose the conversion of any more land from commercial to residential. Thank you.
And now for the second question. What are the top 2 financial challenges facing the city, and how would you address them? This question, which I'll read again, is for Ms. Holman, Mr. Levins, Mr. Scharf, and Mr. Steen. So the question again is, what are the top 2 financial challenges facing the city, and how would you address them? Ms. Holman.
As was referenced in the last question, the employee benefits and retirement package has to be one of the top issues that has to be addressed. I think the current city council is actually doing a pretty good job in trying to address that. A 2-tiered system is a way that we have to approach this, such that new employees enter into a different kind of arrangement. We can't be amassing the hundreds of millions of dollars literally in liability that we are currently. It just isn't sustainable. We've already had one city in the Bay Area that's gone bankrupt because of this kind of arrangement that the city of Palo Alto and other cities are currently faced with. The second is, it's a toss-up between balancing the way the city is run in terms of efficiencies. I do believe that we need to do the internal audits, the specific and targeted audits that I mentioned. That's one. And then the other is we do need to do a much better job of attracting and promoting retail. We have many wonderful existing retail businesses that we don't promote and serve now, and we need to better support them as well as attracting other businesses, as I mentioned in the past question.
Thank you. Mr. Levins, the 2 top financial challenges facing the city and how you would address them.
Well, the top financial challenge, the most immediate one, is the $10 million budget deficit. Now, recognize that in balancing this budget deficit, there's only about $3 million of cuts that are actually being called for. Another big portion is being saved by delaying necessary maintenance on roads and sidewalks, and another portion is moving money from one fund to the other. And as an accountant, I'll want to take a bigger look at these when I hopefully get onto the city council. The other major issue, which is not getting nearly enough attention, is the $450 million that it's estimated Palo Alto will need over the next 20 years to replace decaying infrastructure. We are not saving enough money, we're not funding enough money to do that now, And we need to come up with a plan. I have not seen any plan whatsoever other than to increase by a couple of $1 million, which is woefully insufficient at this point, the amount being put into funds for that. That, I think, is the biggest issue facing Palo Alto.
Thank you. Mr. Scharf.
I think the top two issues are the unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities, which have gone up about $30 million in the last 2 years, and the pension liabilities that we have. In 2007, we went from 55 to 60. I mean, we went from 60 to 55, and we went from 2.7. We went from 2 to 2.7. What we've done is we've increased those liabilities 86%, which has made an amazing unfunded liability that we have. We need to go to a two-tier system, and we need to negotiate vigorously with the unions on this point. This is very important that we solve that issue. We also have an issue that we need to resolve in terms of our infrastructure needs. There's $450 million out there that we need to figure out how we're going to fund that in the next 20 years, because that is coming due. And I think those are the two main things, and we need to increase business in Palo Alto.
Thank you. Any red cards? Okay, Mr. Weiss.
Thank you. I work in the music business. I produce concerts. I hear a lot of sound systems, and I'm just a little bit worried about this mic. Anyhow, I'm a little disappointed in the direction of this forum. I think the business issue is overrepresented. This is, I really want to talk social issues. Government is not a business. Cultures historically that bundle too closely business interests with leadership, it ends up with something that's not very democratic, does not sound very democratic to me. A challenge in the budget, I want to figure out what it would take. A former Obama campaign worker suggested to me, what if we had something, and don't shriek when I say this, something that I'm calling public option Palo Alto, that is getting ahead of the national debate. What would it cost here locally to try and figure out to provide a tiny modicum of safety net and health care for every Palo Alton? Maybe the most fortunate of us wouldn't have to use it, and maybe there might be 5 or 10% of us who do not have health insurance. I don't have health insurance. I'm a business owner, and for whatever reason, my health provider bounced me from the system. So I want to try and figure out between now and November 3rd what it would cost to have in our budget health care for all of us.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dykewell.
There we go. Clearly, this is a little bit redundant over the first question, I think, but when we look at the biggest issues facing us, I want to move it, I want to raise it up a little bit, because it's not just the $10 million this year. It's a structural deficit problem that we're facing. It's been coming at us for a number of years, and we hadn't addressed it in time, and now it's exacerbated by the state of the economy. So, of course, the biggest piece of that is the benefits cost and labor. But again, we need to look at this as an ongoing long-term issue that we need to solve. It's not just going to be solved this year or moving funds next year. It's long-term. And we need to take a much different look at how we're going to solve that going forward. And then also regarding the infrastructure, this is one of my blanks. And it's being funded about $8 to $10 million a year for a $450 million backlog. We're never going to get there unless we seriously prioritize and look at a real mechanism to apply enough funds to really handle our crumbling sidewalks and roads.
Thank you. And Mr. Leong.
Pensions is one of the big issues that is facing the city. 3 years ago, the City Council voted to give the SEIU and the management and professional group an increase in their pensions. That increased the pension costs from roughly 19% of salaries to 25% of the salaries. Now, part of that deal was that the unions were supposed to give back on their medical costs, which they did, but also that because of the more generous pension, there was supposed to be a wave of retirements, which did happen, but the city government was supposed to get restructured to a more efficient form, which unfortunately did not happen. If you look at how many SEIU union members there were in 2006 when this more generous pension plan was approved, there were 579 SEIU members. Today, according to the city website, there's 617 SEIU members. So instead of restructuring, we've actually grown the size of the workforce.
Thank you. Any more red cards on that question? Okay, question 3. We're moving right along. There is a perception that Palo Alto has too many city employees. Do you agree or disagree, and why? This question is for Mr. Gray, Mr. Leong, Ms. Price, and Ms. Shepard. And again, there is a perception that Palo Alto has too many city employees. Do you agree or disagree, and why? Mr. Gray.
I disagree. And here's the reason, is we love the services in this town, and when I was talking to Jim Keene, he had said, even if you reduce the most minor service, there's going to be a vocal scream that you'll hear. And so to address that question, I think we would have to come together as a group and as a community, and I'm talking about broad community outreach, and really take inventory of the services that we're buying from our city employees. What is the service that we're purchasing? I think I calculated that my family is spending about $13,000 a year for city services, and I'm not really sure what I'm buying. I'm pretty satisfied. I've always been assuming that there were smart people looking after us getting maximum value, but I think to answer that question, it requires a group discussion and a broad community involvement.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Leong.
As my previous comments noted, in 2006, when they granted the more generous retirement packages, they did expect retirements, and they did expect that they would be able to restructure and lower the number of employees. Unfortunately, that didn't occur with all the retirements, but we still have the opportunity to have the council provide oversight to get that restructuring done. Second is, if you look at the management structure and look at the span of control, the number of managers per employee, you'll see a wide variance. There are some departments which do have one manager for 10 or 11 employees, but there are departments where there's one manager for maybe 3 or 4 employees. What we need to do is establish, first of all, a span of control benchmark for all the different departments so that you have an appropriate number of employees per manager. Then we could look at how we can more efficiently deliver the services that we all like to our residents.
Thank you. Ms. Price.
Yes, with a question like this, I would feel this is a very serious decision. And we are a very service-rich community. Our demands, we have high demands of our employees, and we have high expectations of all the services. For a city of this size, we have a huge number of services. I think a serious discussion of changes in employee numbers would require a very extensive evaluation. There has been some discussion in the past in terms of restructuring. It is my belief that that is not the first course of action. That would only be, in my opinion, in an emergency situation after all the other alternatives have been addressed, some of which I mentioned in my earlier remarks. This would be a very, very serious issue, and without more detail, there is no way I would answer this as a yes or no.
Thank you. Ms. Shepard.
We are a full-service city. We have our own waste treatment. We have 5 libraries. We have children's theater. We have 6 fire stations. We like our services. We are structured to support these services, and we would need a group discussion if we were to reduce any of our employees in order to keep this fully staffed. We also have a situation right now where the city manager is not filling about 30 spots that he could fill with the union in trying to bring down some of the employee numbers. So without rigorously looking at this, I would have to disagree that we have too many staff, because we already have spots available that are not being filled, so that we could help with the budget deficit on the one hand and also begin to tighten the services at City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Any red cards? Mr. Klein.
A little history and some facts. We substantially, as a city, ramped up the number of employees that we had in the last half of the 90s, right before the dot-com boom, during the dot-com boom. Along came the dot-com bust, and we reduced the number of employees. We were level for a while. In the last year or two, with the recession, we've again reduced the number of employees. We're back now to where we were in 1995. Are there possibilities of additional reductions and maintaining our city services? Yes, there are, but it's not going to be easy. One problem to it is that in the 90s, the City Council agreed to a provision in the labor contract with SEIU that says that they have a veto over any restructuring that we do. And that's one thing that we are trying very hard in the present labor negotiations to get removed, because if we don't have that removed, then we're in endless negotiations with them as to how we restructure. We want to have a way of doing it like most other cities have. This is an unusual provision. It's not unique to Palo Alto, but we're one of the few, and we need to get that removed so we can really do some serious, efficient restructuring.
Thank you. Mr. Hackman.
Again, John Hackman. We have valuable employees called to public service. Most of them are really quite good. And Mr. Klein makes a very good point on that, and I hope we make progress in this negotiation. But whether we have too many or not relates also to their function and their supervision. We have a city manager, an assistant city manager, communications director, public works director, people assisting public works director, an arborist, an assistant arborist. And we have people that give out contracts. We had a contract to cut down all the trees on California Avenue suddenly. Now, was that too many people above them where responsibility was too diluted? Perhaps we'll find out. But the number of employees is relevant to the way in which we're structured and managed. And more employees may sometimes result in a less accurate and even a less service delivery function for our city, depending how we're structured.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on from talking about budget deficit, workers' benefits, and cost containment to the attraction or retention of retail. The first question is for Mr. Levins, Ms. Holman, Mr. Klein, Ms. Price, and Mr. Dykewell. What 2 things would you do to support retail that could be implemented in a short time frame, such as a year? So we're looking for 2 things that would support retail that could be implemented within 1 year. Mr. Levins.
Well, as a former retail business owner myself, I owned a retail franchise in Mountain View called Once Upon a Child. It was a children's retail store. The most important thing for me and what I found my best days were when the city was having functions, when the city was doing things for the community, having art fairs and that sort of thing. Those were the best days, and when those days were coming, we prepared for them for weeks, because that made or broke our month, believe it or not. So the better the quality of life, the better the community life that we have, the better our retail stores will be, the better they will operate, and the more attractive it will be for other businesses to come in. The second thing is we need to maintain our services to the businesses. If we don't do that, the businesses will not come here. As a retail business owner, it was essential that I had the services provided. Without that, I couldn't do business.
Thank you. Ms. Holman.
I'm glad to get this question. There are a number of things we can do to support our existing retail. First of all, I would say, and attract new, actually, I would say, we currently have a multi-tentacled process for businesses to go through before they can either have events or open their business in an existing building. You have to go through utilities, public works, building, planning. None of that is coordinated. I do understand, I'm very enthusiastic actually about our new city manager, and I understand he has started to work on that. But we drive away businesses because of that. Most recent story, and not the only one by any means, most recent story I've been told was by a young man who lives in Palo Alto, wanted to open a small brewery here. 2,500 square feet was all he needed. He finally gave up on the process, went to Belmont and got permits in 2 days. For our existing retailers, the same thing happens for events that promote the businesses. Same kind of tentacled process. That needs to change. As a part of Destination Palo Alto, we rely specifically, it seems like, on special events. We need to promote the existing attractions that we have here, including our existing retail, and there are many other things that we can talk about later.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Well, I hope I'm not violating any rules, but I'm going to give 3 rather than 2. 1, improve and continue Destination Palo Alto. This is a program we have going right now and it's just completing its first year, by which we're trying to improve the number of people who come and visit Palo Alto and use our restaurants and hotels and our other resale businesses. We're spending about $250,000 a year on that, and I think it's money well spent. Second, more public-private partnerships, such as the one we have underway right now at Litton Plaza, where a combination, a partnership between some very dedicated, good citizens who came up with half the money, the city's come up with the other half of the money to improve Litton Plaza, which is, of course, right at the heart of our downtown area. And third, I think that we have to give more resources to our new city manager in business development. We only have one person devoted to business development right now. One of the reasons we hired Jim Keene as the city manager a year ago is that he has a very good track record on business development, and I think that we need to support him in those efforts. We have a great brand in Palo Alto. We've seen that by the recent location of Tesla motor cars in the Stanford Research Park, and we need to really sell that great brand that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Dykewell. I'm sorry, I skipped Ms. Price.
Yes, I can think of a couple of items. One, similar to others that have been mentioned here. One is to really re-examine the development review and the permitting process. That is something that needs to be accelerated and streamlined. That concept was originally from the city of Sunnyvale. They do it very well there. Revise our economic development strategies, use those that we have already on the books, and as I mentioned before, look at best practices in other communities. That includes working in a more collaborative way with the Chamber of Commerce and looking at the best practices, such as the program in the city of Berkeley, which is a Buy Berkeley program. They have a very, very active program. Neighborhood retail is very vital, and they have tremendous sales tax revenue in the city of Berkeley. They've done quite well through the recession period. Those are the things I would look at.
Thank you. And now Mr. Dykewell.
Thanks. Promoting a healthy economy is one of my planks on my campaign, so I can't believe I blew it on the first question. But I think we should put the permitting process and tracking online. We could do that probably very quickly, and have consistency among inspectors. So one doesn't go out and tell them to do something one way, and the next one comes out and tells them to do something another way. We could assign an ombudsman that would help walk people through the process. We need to work more closely with the Chamber of Commerce on selling the assets of Palo Alto. We have a highly educated workforce here. We have a fiber ring for advanced development. We have a lot of assets here that we need to sell. We need to update the economic development plan. I don't see why that needs to be a multi-year thing. It was written in '92. It was revised in '99. It's 10 years old. We need to jump on that so that we have a strategic approach to promoting businesses in Palo Alto.
Thank you. I see 2 red cards. Okay, Miss. We need to take a break before we continue.